All right. Thank you. It's always such a delight to join you on the ZNCC calls. I've given various variations of this presentation several times now to different audiences. Typically, I start off with an introduction to the climate crisis and the urgent need to eliminate road carbon emissions, relating the climate crisis to the role of the built environment, highlighting the vast responsibility and thus vast opportunities we have by working in this space. But you guys know all of this already. That's why the ZNCC started back in 2017. I do want to put in my perennial plug for vocal outreach and advocacy, especially from the ZNCC, with our clients and colleagues, but most critically with our elected representatives. Our carbon policies must incentivize retaining our existing buildings. I know we're getting there, and Laura, you're amazing with the COP28 updates there. So instead, I'd like to jump right into the heart of the presentation. In historic preservation and conservation practice, we address aspects of embodied carbon as a matter of course, as we extend the useful lives of our buildings through durability, maintenance, and repair. Our material selections affect the upfront carbon emissions, and as we support the redevelopment of the deconstruction, salvage, and reuse economy that was largely lost in the 20th century, we can help keep our materials and carbon investments in play. For operational carbon, we typically focus on the building envelope and systems to keep ourselves comfortable. And so we look to the careful energy retrofit of our buildings with sound building science principles, with strategies like Passive House and targets like zero net carbon design. But is this everything? Keep your building and retrofit it. The simplicity of this concept is vital for getting this message out to a wide audience, including to our policymakers. But in that simplicity is the danger of a false narrative that every bit of design and construction is equally well thought out and of equal performance and merit in need of the same retrofit for operational carbon performance. What does that even mean? What is improvement? And for that matter, what needs improvement? We need to consider how the design of our built environment fosters comfortable, long-lasting occupancy, thoughtfully and sensibly meeting our needs and ideally delighting our senses now and into the future. And so today, I would like to talk to you about the embodied wisdom of our global built heritage, or what we've been calling inherently sustainable features. These are the design elements that improve comfort and habitability through their placement, layout, configuration, or use. Their basis and rationality and practicality have led to their repetition, translation into beauty and style, and have often become character-defining features, whether defining regional styles or transcending them. In our lifetimes, in the era of cheap fuel, it is easy to forget or not even realize how they came into being in the first place. We're surrounded by examples of features that serve a purpose and of facsimiles that do not, and it can take a surprising amount of effort to shift your focus to view features from this perspective. Take shutters, for example. They're used all over the world in all sorts of configurations and styles. Some protect from the cold, some block out the heating sun. Some are for protection, durability, or privacy. And yet, despite this variation, we see fake, inappropriate, and nonsensical shutters so often that it's become a running joke. Similarly, the sawtooth roof of sorts seems to be intended to convey some sort of idea of industrial chic. But as an applied shape to a parapet, it completely misses the point of what a sawtooth roof is, how it works, and why it was found so frequently on factory buildings in the first place. This idea of inherently sustainable features is an important paradigm shift in our thinking about our built heritage. And yet, it builds upon what we as preservation professionals do best, searching the past for clues and finding ways to carry valuable pieces of our cultural heritage forward. For millennia, people have sought thermal comfort in their living environments through the effective and ingenious use of available materials and energy. How many of these strategies are a part of the authenticity of use of our built heritage that can be effectively put to use today? Today, I'm going to present an overview of some of the inherently sustainable features that are related to thermal comfort in different climates. There's also a lot of available embodied wisdom addressing resilience, durability, repair and maintenance, and lighting, and these will have to wait for another time. We live in a world with many different climates. For our purposes, we can think about 4 very general climate types. These 4 have to do with our thermal comfort, whether we are too hot or too cold, and how the relative humidity affects that comfort and how that changes seasonally. In cold climates, you want to gain and retain heat, whether from the sun or an internal source. In hot climates, you want to avoid and expel heat. In temperate or mixed climates, your strategy will depend on the season. Heat gain can take many forms. Heat radiates or travels through the air from heat sources like the sun. More effectively, heat is conducted by direct touch. Heat rises, and as it cools, it falls back down again, creating convective heat loops. Orientation to both the height and angle of the sun as it crosses the sky, and how that changes cyclically throughout the year, can be used to maximize the solar heat gain. Strategic placement and use of thermal mass can serve to absorb heat from any source and radiate it back outward over a longer period of time. In a cold climate, you also want to hold on to your heat and not, as your parents always warned, try to instead heat the whole outdoors. Cold winter wind draws heat away. Limiting the exposure to prevailing winds will help minimize its effect. Compact volumes minimize the surface area where heat can be lost. An airtight building envelope will prevent warm air from being drawn out directly, and insulation slows the heat transfer through the materials of the enclosure. Smaller volumes require less heat input to keep warm, and limiting airflow from one space to the next allows you to make use of the gained heat in one space for longer. Living patterns are very important as well. Our patterns of living, sleeping, cooking, and other activities greatly influence our experiences of thermal comfort. In the real world, these strategies are often employed together, and they take form in a number of beautiful, thoughtful ways. On cold days, enclosed farmyards and plazas both invite in the warmth of the sunshine and keep out the chill of the wind to make these spaces comfortable for longer than they would be otherwise. Swiss buildings are traditionally compact volumes with stuccoed, airtight exteriors. On Cape Cod, the lower back of this house faces and redirects the cold north winds. The utilitarian spaces serve as a thermal buffer, while the habitable spaces enjoy the cozy warmth of the available sunlight from the south-facing windows. These very thick thatched roofs in Japan and the sod roofs common in the Faroe Islands both provide insulation. The window-to-wall ratio is important. Glass is not as insulative as a solid wall, and windows provide opportunities for air infiltration. Exterior storm windows reduce air infiltration and add insulation, while still allowing daylight, solar heat gain, and visibility. These solid shutters are operable and more durable than glass, and are more likely to be used at night during a storm or when the space is not in use. This casement window in Old Quebec has a seasonally installed exterior storm window. One pane is operable that still allows airflow when desired. The primary window itself has an edge detail where the two sashes meet that functions as a weather seal. In Central Europe, box windows are a form of insulated window openings with pairs of operable sashes and some with operable individual panes. Collectively, the pairs of windows create an airspace much wider than that found in our insulated glazing, with components that can be operated, repaired, and maintained. Entry vestibules minimize heat loss at doorways and at residential and at commercial scales. Offset doors minimize wind blowing all the way through. Thermal masses, like this centrally located massive chimney in Quebec and this tile oven in France, retain the heat from the fires within to radiate out into the rooms for a longer period of time. Conductive underfloor heating is used around the world. The ancient Romans had hypocausts. In northern China, a raised heated platform called a kang is used for both sleeping and for daytime activity. In Korea, the ondol system carries the heat from the kitchen under a heated stone floor slab in the rest of the house and is then exhausted from a chimney at the other side. Traditional Black Forest farmhouses are compact forms with small windows and are built above their barns. The rising heat off of their livestock warms the human residents living upstairs. Some strategies thoughtfully limit what needs to be warmed. Ingle nooks provide cozy seating in a semi-enclosed space near the fire. Bed curtains create small enclosed spaces to keep in the warmth as you sleep. And in Japan, a kotatsu consists of a heater placed under a table and closed by a heavy blanket tablecloth. In Afghanistan and Iran, the same concept is called a corsi. In hot climates, you want to avoid any heat gain, and you want to get rid of any heat that does come in. Solar orientation is important for hot climates to minimize the solar heat gain. Shading blocks the hot sun, Light colors and other reflective surfaces help to bounce that incoming heat away. In some cases, insulation can also be useful to block heat from getting in. To get rid of heat, prevailing winds can be harnessed to draw heat away. Breezes can also be induced, such as through geometries that make use of the Venturi effect, which speeds airflow through constricted spaces. Heat rises, and geometries that create a stack effect or chimney effect draw hot air up and out of the building. Tall spaces also allow heat to rise up and away from people. The amount of humidity in the air greatly influences many of the other options for getting rid of unwanted heat. In hot, arid climates, evaporative cooling works well, and it is easier to remain comfortable at higher temperatures. Temperatures tend to fluctuate rapidly as dry air does not hold on to heat very well. Cooler nighttime temperatures can be used to flush the hot air out before it heats up again the next day. Thermal mass can be used as a well-timed heat sink and heat source to create a time lag compatible with the daily temperature swings, as that heat is more readily released into the cooler nighttime air outside, or makes its way through to the inside in time to counteract the chill. In hot, humid climates, all of the moisture in the air retains heat and temperatures do not drop as drastically at night. Strategies harnessing daily temperature swings are not very effective, and so it can be preferable to avoid thermal mass and instead opt for materials that do not retain heat. Evaporative cooling also doesn't work as well in moisture-saturated air. More air movement is needed to get the same amount of evaporation to cool us down. Ventilation and breezes become more important as strategies and are encouraged through open floor plans, cross ventilation, and more surface area on a non-compact, sprawling building exterior. Vegetation cools its surroundings, both through shading and evapotranspiration. Studies in urban areas indicate that air temperatures can be up to 9 degrees Fahrenheit or 5 degrees Celsius cooler on tree-lined streets and in parks than on neighboring streets lacking vegetation. Additionally, trees and vegetation have been shown to improve air quality, stormwater management, water quality, and overall quality of life. In Capri, some paths are shaded by trees or grapevines, but they are also more consistently lined by tall masonry walls, providing shade from one side or the other. In Iran, sabbats cover a portion of streets, inducing breezes and providing pedestrians respite from the hot sun. Light colors reflect the hot sunlight away. These narrow whitewashed streets in Greece and Portugal also take advantage of the shading of one building on another, induce breezes and thermal mass. The Charleston, South Carolina single-house typology is oriented to harness the prevailing breezes, and the long porch along the south face provides shade. The more modest shotgun house typology is also set up for front-to-back ventilation. Tall ceilings and windows allow heat to rise up and away from people in these rooms. Porches, verandas, and lanais provide outdoor living space, shade, and shelter from rain, while still encouraging ventilation through open windows. Retractable awnings and fixed overhangs should ideally work with the local angle of the sun to shade as much as is needed. Horizontal shading can be porous to allow airflow and can be designed as a support for vegetation, including grapevines. Extended eaves and wraparound balconies are also shading devices. Louvered shutters block the sun while still allowing for ventilation and views. Exterior blinds and Bahama shutters tilt outward at the bottom to maximize shading and ventilation. This wood screen panel in China and this jolly in India are beautifully decorative elements that do the same. Mashrabiyas in the Middle East project beyond the building facade to maximize their simultaneous shading and ventilation. Jars of water are placed within to also provide evaporative cooling. The wind catchers or badgirs in the Middle East are very distinctive climate-driven features. Hot air is drawn up one side of the thermal chimney, while cooling wind is brought down the other. The proportions are driven by local conditions. In more humid areas near the sea, the badgirs are lower and wider. While where the air is drier, the badgirs are taller and more slender to capture the faster wind and avoid windblown dust. The air is further cooled by the evaporative cooling of an underground canal or qanat. This combination can cool the air by up to 20 degrees Fahrenheit or 12 degrees Celsius. In Turkey, adobe domed beehive houses create a thermal chimney with the rising heat venting from the top. The domes maximize surface area for evaporative cooling, while providing shade for half the roof where there otherwise would be none. Yakhchals, such as this one in Iran, push this form to the extreme to store ice and food in the desert. On a much smaller scale, botijos and zirpots use evaporative cooling to keep water and food cool. A company in India is now working with the same concept to sell terracotta refrigerators that require no electricity. Spaces with shade, shelter, and air circulation, and the courtyard of a Chinese home. Concepts can be found in Iran and in Pompeii. Some courtyards enhance their thermal comfort and delight with fountains. Sheltered exterior spaces can be used to minimize the need for interior conditioned space, such as in condo building hallways in Florida and airport gates in Hawaii. These two houses in Indonesia and in Florida are built of lightweight materials raised up on stilts, allowing cooler
Recording
shaded
in
air
progress.
To pass below the floor. For the house in Florida, the stilts provided a measure of resilience against storm surges for decades until the surge was too high in Hurricane Ian in 2022. Ceiling fans circulate air and help draw hot air upward. They can also be reversed to push warm air downward in cooler seasons. Punkas move air by swinging back and forth. Wicker furniture allows for cooling airflow, and picnic tables under the shade of pergolas or trees extend living patterns outdoors. Heat generating activities can be relegated to separate outbuildings. This Miami homeowner keeps their washer and dryer in an outdoor shed, reducing their cooling load even without the use of a clothesline. This outbuilding kitchen in China keeps the heat and fire risk away from the main house. Sleeping patterns can look different in hot climates. Hammocks take advantage of nighttime breezes, and ceramic headrests, such as this one from China, dissipate rather than collect warmth. Sleeping porches seek airflow and any cooler nighttime breezes. In temperate or mixed climates, strategies from both hot and cold climates are used in tandem, or depending on which is the more dominant season. The variability of conditions throughout the year becomes important to work with and to address. Deciduous trees and vegetation lose their leaves in the winter, allowing for additional solar heat gain when it is needed the most. In greenhouses, conservatories, and other places with sky-facing glazing, a seasonal whitewash shading can be applied to maximize solar heat gain in the winter and minimize it in the summer. Operability and adjustability become important to accommodate shifting conditions. Operable windows are a prime example. Double-hung windows can be operated in tandem to induce stronger breezes, with small openings on the lower side, on the lower sash on the windward side, and larger openings on the upper sash on the leeward side. Retractable awnings, umbrellas, and the seasonal use of blankets, rugs, and seasonally appropriate clothing all serve to dynamically adjust the thermal comfort. In many locations, there are long-standing traditions of escaping the summer heat through visits to summer homes or to community garden plots. Arcades provide protection from the sun and precipitation in any climate. Like other fixed shading devices, ideally their height and depth are aligned to allow in the low angle of the winter sun. This overview is a small sample of the global diversity of human wisdom on this topic. There's much more to be learned from other traditions, and that is the intention for the ongoing development of this project. Strategies often have cultural significance. I've only discussed the physical climate-driven aspects, but it is important to acknowledge that they don't happen in a vacuum. With a heightened awareness of traditional strategies, we can be better equipped to apply this wisdom appropriately to inspired new design as well, whether or not it is in a historical context. There are many more examples out there and more to be discovered when you shift your mode of thinking about the world around us. And so I pose a question to you. What features and detailing do you find that can optimize the needs of thermal comfort, durability, and resilience? What features and detailing do you find that can reduce embodied and operational carbon use in fulfilling these needs? And what do you see when you truly look and listen to the quiet wisdom of climate-based design? As I wrap up, I would like to leave you with a few thoughts. There is no perfect solution in any climate, whether new or traditional. Consider these features to be a part of a well-considered, layered overall carbon strategy. They provide a richer palette to work with. We can investigate, celebrate, and enhance the features and details that allow our buildings to perform well, even before any further modern day ins are considered. We can better advocate for the retention, restoration, or reconstruction of character-defining features when their climate impact is understood as more than just nice-to-have features for a later phase, if at all. We can consider the appropriate use of resources and pursue strategies that are compatible with our building features to improve performance through modification rather than full replacement. Our buildings must remain habitable in extreme conditions, say if the power is out for several days after a storm. These strategies, beyond normal conditions, may also become part of the resilience plan. As our local climates continue to change, it is important to better understand the strategies and features that work well in the new climate and find ways to work them sensitively and appropriately into our buildings. These features and strategies are currently being gathered on APT's OSCAR website. We invite you to come back to the site in the near future to make use of this resource. Thank you.